This is a sordid story. It's a story of betrayals, whether agreed upon or not. It's a story of carnal passions. Not only that, it's a story of business. It's a story of blood. It's a story of disputed inheritances. It's also a story of scams. It's a very Italian story that blends many ingredients. Famous and less famous characters. Stars of the billionaire jet set. Alleged ones, unscrupulous lawyers, heiresses, debts with the tax authorities, but also glossy magazines, scandalous photos, the gossip you often hear in Italian society. These are many ingredients that mixed together result in a story that often ends up in the newspapers for a long time. It's a triple murder, or rather a double murder plus suicide. Definitely gruesome, and it's a long aftermath that finally sees as protagonists a wealthy but not sensible heiress, a ruthless lawyer, and an ambitious industrialist destined to go very, very far. This is the story of the Casati Stampa inheritance. Our story opens with some dead people, murdered dead people, 2 killed and 1 suicide. It's a really ugly story, one of those that sometimes we wouldn't want to tell or remember ourselves. It's a summer story set on August 30th, 1970 in Rocco on Puccini Street. Within the servants' quarters of a noble palace, he dials 112 to call the police. Gunshots were heard coming from the main hall. 6 rifle shots. The servants in the house are afraid that something bad has happened. A few minutes earlier, Marquis Camillo Casati Stampa di Soncino had told the staff not to disturb him. He needed to have a talk with his wife and one of their friends. That talk, in reality, was a final one, and it ends a long, troubled period for a couple who, whether they wanted it or not, were often in the spotlight, both in Gazette and in the tabloid newspapers. Camillo Casati Stampa di Soncino was a wealthy landowner, an heir to one of the most beautiful and oldest noble families in Italy, especially in Lombardy. The Marquis had many estates, a great fortune, and a refined taste not only when it came to friendships, obviously within the old nobility, but also in art and customs. Marquis Camillo enjoyed the good life. He also liked beautiful women. In his first marriage, he married a ballerina, a very, very beautiful girl, who gave him a daughter named Anna Maria. But after a while, the Marquis became infatuated with another woman, Anna Fallerino, a beautiful woman who was already getting a lot of attention from high society, a woman whom the Marquis met again for the first time in Cannes in 1958, 22 years earlier. At the time, Fallerino was married to the engineer. Well, between the two, between the Marquis and Fallerino, a connection quickly developed, a connection that we could describe as blazing with passion, to the point that Marquis Camillo had decided to pursue not only his own divorce, but also the possibility that Fallerino herself would divorce Dromi to marry him. At that time, divorce in Italy was nearly unthinkable or almost forbidden, possible only for the very rich, who could turn to the tribunal of the Sacra Rota and obtain the annulment of the marital bond only through reasons that were often imaginative or even fake, convenient reasons, but obtainable thanks to the good offices of those very few lawyers capable of knowing, or rather, mastering canon law. They were extremely difficult divorces. They were expensive for this reason, but what can you do? For a wealthy landowner, money was the least of his concerns. What had become one of the most publicized marriages, the Casati Stampa with Fallerino, had soon become tabloid scandal material. Yes, because even during their honeymoon trip, Marquis Camillo had confessed his unorthodox fantasies to his new wife. The Marquis liked to watch. He liked to watch his wife while she was intimately involved with other men. And Fallerino decided to take part in these perverse games in which the Marquis would invite young lovers, often strangers, to participate. and to take advantage of his wife's charms. Sometimes these young lovers were even paid with generous tips. The Marquis liked to watch, sometimes even to take pictures and write everything down in a diary. Yes, you might think it's a perversion, but how many perversions exist nowadays? It would all be harmless if it weren't for the fact that at a certain point in our story, Marchesa Fallerino meets a young man already known to the jet set. We're talking about Massimo Minorenti, a young man studying political science at university in Rome, and it's said that he has a relationship, or at least is seeing the dancer Lola Falano. Truth or not, it doesn't matter in this case. What we know is that Massimo Minorenti quickly becomes a regular at the house, Casati Stampa and the inheritance of Villa San Martino. And that's the problem, because the Marquis does like his wife to have fun with young strangers, as long as it doesn't become something ongoing with a single lover. In that case, the Marquis would take it very badly, and in fact he does take it very badly. He takes it badly, to confessing his wife's betrayal to close friends. What initially seemed to Marquis Camillo like an almost innocent game between two consenting adults becomes a perverse game. The Marquis suspects his wife does it intentionally to make him suffer, even though he has written a will in which he leaves most of his property exactly to his wife, Anna Fattorino. Anna doesn't care about any of this. In fact, she continues to see Massimo Minorenti. She sees him on her and her husband's properties, but also elsewhere, until the drama of jealousy explodes in all its dramatic intensity. It's the summer of 1970. Camillo Casati Stampa is invited by some friends to join a hunting trip at the Valdagno estate. It's the Marsato estate in Veneto. What should have been a weekend of leisure turns into an ordeal for the nobleman. Why can't he focus on the hunt? No, gentlemen. Camillo Casati Stampa can't stop thinking about the fact that Anna stayed in Rome, and most likely not alone. He dwells on it. He keeps dwelling on it. To the point that the Marquis, in the middle of the night, picks up the phone and calls. He knows that Anna. That weekend, she's in Rome, at the palace on Puccini Street, number 9. He knows the home number by heart. He calls. On the other end, it's Massimo Minorenti who answers, hearing his wife's lover's voice. For Marquis Crolla, everything collapses. He hangs up. A few minutes later, he calls again. Anna answers this time, but the Marquis still can't compose himself. He doesn't hang up immediately. For the first time, he reacts angrily, insults his wife, threatens her, and blames her for everything. Unfazed, his wife hangs up on him. He doesn't know that this time the game has really gone too far, because Camillo Casati Stampa returns quickly to Rome as fast as possible. And already there, in the morning, he brought his hunting rifle with him, a 12-gauge Browning. He carries it slung over his shoulder. When he enters, he quickly gathers the 5 servants present, including waiters and staff. He asks if the lady is home. Yes. Alone? No. Camillo already knows who is with his wife. He asks not to be disturbed. In fact, he orders not to be disturbed under any circumstances. After that, he takes an erotic calendar out of his bag, one of those he used to buy at the newsstand together with his wife. In those naughty games he often played, and he starts writing on the back of this calendar a sort of epitaph, a final message to his wife. He had often considered killing her or himself, more often himself, but this time he couldn't go through with it. This time his anger is too strong, his indignation, his sense of being betrayed. Camillo Casati Stampa enters the living room and takes the rifle out of its case. The bullet is already in the chamber. He finds his wife on the sofa in the living room, with Massimo Minorenti standing nearby. Without saying a word, Camillo Casati Stampa shoulders the rifle and fires 3 shots at his wife, who dies instantly. Massimo Minorenti tries to find refuge somewhere. First, he tries to escape, but there are no other doors except the one behind the Marquis. So it's impossible to leave. Then he grabs a small table and overturns it. He tries to take cover behind that makeshift shelter, but it's no use. The Marquis fires 2 shots at Minorenti. The first hits the small table, and the second hits the young man directly, killing him as well. The Marquis saves the last shot for himself. When the servants hear those shots, they realize a tragedy has occurred. As we said, they immediately call 112. The Carabinieri arrive, followed by a police patrol car. The officers and Carabinieri enter and discover a scene. It almost looks like something out of a horror movie. She, Anna Fallerino, is seated on the sofa, legs crossed, using a stool almost as if it were an ottoman, and with a large blood stain on her chest, her eyes wide open, her mouth open. Minorenti, lying on the ground, hit directly by the gunshots, had tried to curl up behind that small table, but he couldn't save himself. And lastly, the Marquis. He had shot himself in the head, shattering part of his skull. His face was no longer even there. He had aimed the weapon exactly under his chin in a final act of utter desperation. That's how it ended terribly, that story of the Stampa family that had even made it to the tabloids, with the published photos, which were often taken by the Marquis himself, who enjoyed sending them to friends or even to newspapers. But the story didn't end there, as the Marquis had a 19-year-old daughter, Anna Maria. Under Italian law then, she was still a minor since the age of majority was 21, so the daughter wasn't emancipated. She couldn't manage the inheritance on her own, and the inheritance was also disputed. Yes, because the Marquis, in his will, had arranged to leave all his possessions to his wife, except for a life insurance policy and a few works of art in favor of his daughter. Of course, from a legal standpoint, one might have some doubts about the legitimacy of such a bequest. Moreover, the inheritance was contested by the Fallerino family, who decided to hire a prominent lawyer from the Roman scene. His name was Cesare Previti. He was appointed by the court as the guardian of the young Marchesa, while she waited to come of age to become an adult. In short, it was up to lawyer Previti to safeguard and manage the estate until that fateful day. When Anna Maria Casati Stampa finally came of age, the young woman had already decided to leave everything behind. Everything, absolutely everything, even her family's past. She had decided to get married, to marry another nobleman, a young man, a young heir from another dynasty. The Donà della Rose family, Count Pier Donato, they had fallen in love and wanted to marry at night and then move to Brazil. The trouble for young Marchioness Anna Maria was not only her father's big problems with the tax authorities. Yes, because Marquis Camillo did not have a good relationship with the Italian tax authorities. He had some unresolved issues, but also from the fact that the young girl, raised in nobility, did not have a clear and precise understanding of the value of possessions. And here comes into play the last actor in this dark, grotesque, and bloody Italian-style comedy of ours. He's an ambitious entrepreneur destined for success. You'll hear about him often in the future. He's a real estate developer, as they would say in Rome, a building contractor. Gradually, he will also become a television and print publisher, advertising magnate, sportsman, and eventually a major politician. As you've guessed, Silvio Berlusconi sets his sights on Villa San Martino, the Casati Stampa family's noble residence in Arcore. That beautiful villa with its huge garden is very tempting. It's valued at 1.7 billion of that time. A huge amount of money, an enormous sum. Berlusconi doesn't want to pay it. He's willing to meet the Marchesina halfway through a special agreement. He gives her 500 million, which is less than a third of the real value of the villa, but not in cash. In shares, but in unlisted companies. It's partly a scam, a trick, but Marchesina accepts. But in a short time, she realizes that those securities are not marketable. She can't exchange them for cash. That money she needs, not just to go to Brazil, but to settle the tax debts inherited from her father. And this is where the full scam takes place. Through Previti, Berlusconi lets Marchesina know that he's willing to buy back the shares at half their value. Not 500 million anymore, but 250 million. Marchesina finally agrees, returns the shares, takes the money, and exits the story. The villa, along with its huge park, comes under the control of its new owner. Imagine an owner who bought that property paying only a seventh of what its real value would be. It's a bargain, even if it's a bargain made at the expense of a particularly unlucky young woman struck by misfortune. and who didn't have a clear idea of the value she was dealing with. In that villa, there will be some interesting things happening in the years to come, starting with the arrival of a strange character. His name is Vittorio Mangano. Officially, he is hired as a stableman because inside the villa there are some old stables. Berlusconi will say he intends to revitalize them and restore their activity. In reality, it would later be revealed that Mangano, a mafia boss, was there to guarantee the safety of Berlusconi's children. At a time when, in Lombardy, especially in Brianza, kidnappings are in fashion. Then, as time goes by, Villa San Martino will become a center of economic, sports, and political power, and finally the venue for the so-called elegant dinners, or to put it another way, the well-known bunga. It's a bit sad. The story of this villa, from a beautiful, magnificent, noble residence to a bachelor pad, first for Marquis Camillo and his intrigues and rather perverse sexual fantasies. And then will the Berlusconi affairs. Who knows? Maybe it was in the destiny of that building to follow such a path. Or maybe it's just a story that, like they say about God, sometimes enjoys playing dice.